today's jobs report is perhaps a little comforting, but it still suggests a fragile economy. Randall Kroszner was at the Fed for almost 3 years, and before that served on President Bush's Council of Economic Advisors. He is now an economics professor at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business and joins us from our Chicago bureau. Randy, you think recession is a possibility? To today's jobs number reduce the probability of that at all?
I think that's right. I think it's a possibility, but I don't think it's a likelihood. We saw some reasonably balanced job growth across different sectors of the economy, certainly not robust jobs growth, but we also saw some revisions over the previous few months, and so that gives a glimmer of hope. So although I think the possibility of a recession is on the table, I still don't think that it's likely.
Now, we're coming off a quarter where we saw tremendous profit growth at U.S. corporations, and now we're seeing corporations use their cash to buy back shares, to invest it sort of in their own business and not in headcount. How would you get a company to hire right now?
I think one of the key things going forward is related to all of the discussions about the debt ceiling and about the fiscal issues, because there's a lot of uncertainty about what the tax burdens are going to be, both on corporations and individuals. And I think if we can get some clarity there, if we can get some good, sustainable fiscal policy, maybe some tax reforms that'll help to reduce capital taxes, we can actually get some more investment and some more job creation in the U.S.
Right. And I keep hearing, though, about that question of uncertainty. Some call it the blood in the water, the question of what's going to happen in the calendar with the expiration of the payroll tax holiday, those questions about what the super committee is actually going to decide on tax policy. I mean, are we setting ourselves up for a fragile environment through at least the beginning of the next year? I mean, talk to me about the calendar here. What should we be bracing ourselves for?
No, certainly. Unfortunately, I think there are other shoes to drop. We've got a lot of uncertainty coming from Europe. Every a big solution they come up with really seems to be only a 2-week solution, and so they've got to make some very tough decisions there, because if they have a fiscal crisis that leads to a banking crisis, that's going to have an effect on the U.S. We've got that uncertainty. We've got the uncertainties, as you mentioned, with respect to the super committee. But at least we have some steps where we're trying to deal with our fiscal issues now. If only Greece had done this 5 or 10 years ago, they still wouldn't be well off, but they'd be a lot better off than they are today.
Quickly, before we go to break, I want to ask you, you mentioned that question of Europe going into the weekend. There was some hope that this conversation between Chancellor Merkel and French President Sarkozy would mean that there's some sort of near-term look towards aid. What would make you more confident that we're not headed towards a credit crisis in Europe?
Yeah, they need to do something that is credible. So they've got to do one thing or the other. They've either got to say, okay, fine, now it's time to restructure, or we use Powell doctrine and say we're going to make everything right, and so all the aid is going to be increased dramatically. We're going to do what it takes. And they don't seem to be able to make either decision. They keep going along step by step. But that's a torture process, both for the people in the peripheral countries and for the bondholders. They've got to make a bold decision, and that's the key thing. I'm not sure we're going to get that this weekend, but I really wish they would. And
Randy, one of the questions right now is the kind of support that the Fed could offer if it deemed necessary. Some say you'd have to see inflation expectations come down before the Fed pulled the trigger. How close are we to any kind of QE3?
Well, I think it's right that the Fed is sort of laser focused on inflation and inflation expectations, and that's really a very important issue, because when the chairman undertook the quantitative easing 2 last year, inflation expectations were coming down very significantly, and there was a concern that we'd get into a Japan-style situation. I think QE2 was successful in pushing back against that. Core inflation has moved up from dangerously low levels, and inflation expectations are back in their longer run range. So that makes the cost-benefit trade-off of doing more a lot different now than back then. So I'm sure there's going to be discussion around the FOMC table of would more support be necessary, and what would we do if we were to do something. But I don't see the foundation for it quite yet.
Well, one of the things that the last support program, QE2, did was it helped the equity markets, right? I mean, that was supposed to be restoring confidence. So when you see an equity market sell-off like we did yesterday, why would that not be a trigger for more kind of at least language about help to come?
Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of acknowledgement in the FOMC statement about the economy being in a weaker state than given the data they had back in June. I mean, the GDP numbers were basically revised away all the growth in the first quarter, and we had anemic growth in the second quarter. And so they're certainly going to acknowledge that. But the Fed is not just motivated by any one particular market or any one particular number. And so, although I think there are many market participants would like it if it were that way, they really look at sort of the whole set of numbers to see what the cost-benefit trade-offs are with respect to inflation, with respect to growth, et cetera.
What did, Randy, I mean, there are some who say that we've got this global rebalancing going on. It was made worse by this debt showdown that we had in Washington. How much of a hit to confidence do you think that, going to the edge of Armageddon did to us?
Well, it certainly didn't instill a lot of confidence in our political system, but we did reach a deal. We actually didn't get to Armageddon, which I think is extremely important. I think we're still sort of working that out to see whether this super committee that's going to be set up will actually do something, and hopefully it will, and that'll restore confidence.
Randy, thank you so much.